Okay, so I think this is better since it could accommodate more than 100 instead of Google Meet, right?
Well, this will last for just 40 minutes. Does it last beyond
This
1
one
hour?
is just for 1 hour, Abdul, right?
1 hour.
Yeah.
Last more
It
than
works for just 1 hour unless you pay
hour.
for it.
Go and lie down and sleep.
It is Zoom Pro. You can do more than 2 hours.
Okay, so let's allow others to join in a few minutes time we start.
So I don't understand.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Can the class hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. I
I
can
can
hear
hear
you
you.
from
So
here.
yes, we can.
Good evening, sir.
Sir.
Good evening, sir.
Okay, very
Yes,
well then.
yes, sir.
Good,
Good evening, sir.
good evening. Okay, so
Good evening, sir.
as usual, we'll all mute our mic. I don't like muting everybody, so we'll just mute our mic. If you have any question, you indicate. I'll give you the floor to ask your question. First, I want to officially welcome all of you to class. I want to say that I'm highly delighted to be your tutor again this semester, and I'm happy to see some faces that I know. It gives me a lot of pleasure, to be in this class and be in your midst. I must confess that I missed this class, and I'm just wondering after this semester what will happen. Everybody will find their square root. So everybody that I'm missing, what will happen after the class? But of course, as a teacher, we're used to it. Our job is to teach. From year on to year, we have different set of people who will come across. And at the end of the day, of course, we meet to part. So let's hope that we're going to have another very engaging semester and very interesting semester looking at the development within the international system. So on this note, I want to welcome us to this class. Is going to be a warm-up exercise. I'm hoping that going forward, we'll be able to have a platform. Of course, Zoom now can accommodate everybody. So this is the way to go. The class can also be recorded so others can share and for the benefit of those who are not in class. So this semester we're going to be discussing human rights and security. I am in touch with the program coordinator just to clear our doubts that the course is not human rights and democracy, it is human rights and security. Hopefully before the end of next week, that amendment should be made on the LMS to avoid the confusion. So I had to meet the program coordinator to be sure of where we belong, not to end up teaching students what another teacher is already teaching. So we're on track. 816 is human rights and security. So we're good to go. Right. So human rights and security is what we're going to be looking at, and part of what we're going to be discussing in this course revolves around issues of human rights, what constitutes human rights, various types or categories of human rights. We're also going to be looking at international security. Remember, the course is human rights and security. So we're going to be looking at security. We'll look at international security as well. Then we're also going to try to look at actors in security studies, right? We're going to also look at the nexus between human rights and security. We're also going to look at the role of actors either in promoting security or promoting insecurity as far as the international system is concerned. So more often than not, students tend to ask the question, we are offering international affairs and diplomacy, so what is our business with human rights as a course or human rights and security as a course? You have a lot to do with that. And if you take a look at what is happening within the global system today, the war between Iran and Israel, Iran and the US, and how this war is escalating to Lebanon, to UAE, to Qatar, and all of that, makes it more interesting for you as a student of international affairs and diplomacy, particularly as a student of human rights and security. Right? So the whole idea is to try to see at what point does human rights and security, meet? What is the meeting point between human rights and security? What is the point of convergence and the point of divergence between human rights and security? How does the lack of human rights bring about security challenges? How does insecurity also constitute a threat to human rights, both at the local and at the international level? Right? What are the mechanisms put in place to ensure the provision of human rights and, of course, the provision of security, as the case may be, both at the national and at the international level? So this course, I promise you, is going to be a very interesting course. It's going to be practical to a large extent because we're going to be seeing, instances across the globe that we can relate with, especially looking at the contemporary happenings, within the international system. This is very key, and again, it's going to be a very interesting course. So like I always would tell students, whatever course you offer, the first thing you need to try to do is to demystify the variables that make up the course, right? Every course has a title. So your first point of call is to identify the title or the variables that make up the title of the course. Then you can now demystify each of these variables. So understanding the variables that make up your course is a leeway into a proper understanding of what the course is all about. Sorry, today I decided to do a video and I'm showing my ugly face in class. So please, for those of you who are not as ugly as I am, just manage this ugly and black face today. Subsequent class I would not need to show my ugly face again to avoid human rights violation to people who are beautiful. Okay, so for us, we have two variables in this course. The first variable is human rights. The second variable is national security or security, human rights and security. These are the two variables that make up our course title. So it means that the first thing we need to do is to understand what human rights is all about. The second thing we need to do is to understand what security is all about. Then the third thing will be to weave these two together. What is the relationship between human rights and security? And so basically that's what we are going to establish today, because today is a warm-up exercise. As we go forward, we'll now begin to engage with other more critical issues as far as human rights, and security is concerned. Okay, so let's start by setting the context. Right, the international system, like we saw in MIAD 807, is made up of different countries, and these countries cannot survive in isolation because no state is a state of autarky. Every state must relate with one another. Correct, right? This relationship between and among states manifests in different forms. Right? What is going on between Israel and Iran is a relationship. What kind of relationship is this? War, like Clausewitz will say, is politics by other means. Right? So you can see that around the world we're having pockets of international conflict here and there, and these conflicts portend serious threats not just for international security but also for human rights. Okay, so what that means is that in the absence of peace, human right is threatened. And when human right is threatened, it means that peace is also threatened. Right? So there is a connection between these variables. More often than not, in conflict situation, you see different manifestations of human right violations. It is conflict-related sexual violence, where women and children are mostly victims. Women are raped, women are sexually harassed, and all of that. Women are used as spoils of war. Sometimes women exchange sex for protection. All of this constitute a violation of the dignity of the human person. And we're saying that this can be, and in most cases is prominent in conflict situations or in an atmosphere of insecurity. Right? So basically what this course is trying to look at is to expose students to the understanding that there's a connection between human right and security, and that world over, where human right is not guaranteed, it can become a threat to international security. And that when security is not also provided, that can also become a trigger for human right violation. So that's basically the summary of what this course is all about. But we need to also understand that because the international system understands that in an atmosphere of conflict, in an atmosphere of insecurity, human rights can be violated. That is why there are rules of engagement, or what we call laws of armed conflict. The whole idea of laws of armed conflict is to see how civilians can be protected in conflict situation. Right? So part of what we are going to be discussing in this course is international humanitarian law. Right? So we're going to take a look at international humanitarian law. We're also going to understand the principles of international humanitarian law. We're also going to take a look at, for instance, the degree, of applicability the practicability of international humanitarian law in the context of contemporary realities within the international system. All of these we're going to be doing a diagnosis and a prognosis as far as this course is concerned. The whole idea of jus ad bellum, jus in bello, we are going to take a look at all of this, all of these things in relation to armed conflict, vis-a-vis how those things, affect the right of the human person. So having said that, let's go now to the two variables that make up our course. The first variable is human rights. The second variable is national security. So the first question I have for you now is to say, what is human rights all about? And what is national security all about? Of course, I expect that by now we know that in security studies or international relations, there's no concept that has a single universally acceptable definition, because this concept means different things to different people, right? So human rights as a concept has multiplicities of definitions. Human rights as a concept is omnibus, is nebulous, and is plethora in nature. Human rights as a concept, differs from one scholar to another. So there's usually a point of divergence and a point of convergence as far as the meaning of most concepts in international relations is concerned. But fundamentally, there are dimensions to look at human rights, right? There are different dimensions you can look at human rights. First, we can look at human rights as privileges, right? As privileges enjoyed by individuals because they are humans. Of course, that's why it's called human rights, right? Human rights. It means that if you are not human, you cannot enjoy that right. Okay, so human rights are privileges enjoyed by people or by humans simply because they are humans, nothing more than that. So that's one dimension to look at it. It means that once you're not a human, then you can't enjoy that right because you're not human. Even though man is homo politicus, or man is an animal, but man is a more superior animal that is human. That is why we enjoy human rights. Okay, so that's one dimension to understanding human rights. Privileges enjoyed by human beings simply because they are humans, nothing more than that. But beyond that, there are scholarly definitions, there are lexicographic definitions of human rights. When I say lexicographic, I'm talking about understanding human rights in the context of dictionary explanation, right? If you go to dictionaries of law, dictionary of political science, you will see different definitions of human rights. Okay, but of course, I'm saying that human rights are privileges humans enjoy because they are humans, right? So that's one dimension to it. But let's come a little closer to a more academic way of looking at those things. Human rights, human rights are privileges enjoyed by individuals because they are legal members of a state. Right? Human rights are privileges enjoyed by individuals because they are legal members of a state. Now, if you are not a legal member of a state, you can't enjoy some of this rights. So, in the context of Nigeria, when I talk about human rights in Nigeria as a Nigerian, I am saying that because I'm a Nigerian, there are privileges I enjoy. Being a Nigerian gives me the local standing, gives me the impetus, to subscribe and expect that the state should guarantee, these rights for me. So that's why, for instance, if you are not a Nigerian, you cannot vote and be voted for. If you are not a Nigerian, you cannot be recruited into the Nigerian armed forces. Yes, I know some countries across the world who recruit immigrants into the armed forces, but in Nigeria, you cannot be recruited into Nigerian armed forces if you are an immigrant. You can't enjoy such rights. Okay, so simply put, human rights are privileges enjoyed by individuals because they are legal members of a state. So, if you like, this definition could be political or legalistic in nature. Okay, political or legalistic in nature, attributing human rights to privileges people enjoy simply because they are legal members of a state. Okay, so but it's important for us to know that there are different dimensions of human rights. There are different categorization of human rights, just as there are also different types of human rights. Sometimes human rights can be categorized into political and civic rights and also social economic rights. Okay, I'm looking at classification now. There are types and there are classifications. Okay, classification is a broad arrangement of rights, but types are thematic, identification of rights. Okay, so categorically, human rights can be either civic or political or social cultural rights. Okay, then you begin to have under types. You have things like right to life, right to freedom of expression, right to freedom of association, right to freedom of thought, freedom of movement, and all of that. All of these we're going to look at in our subsequent class. Our assignment today is to understand what human rights is all about and what security is all about, because these two variables make up the pillars of MIAD 816, right? So we have tried to look at human rights. Let's take a look at the second variable, which is national security. Okay? I don't know, can the class hear me clearly?
Yes, sir. Very
Yes, sir.
clear.
Loud and
Yes,
clear.
we can hear
Very
you.
Loud and clear, sir. Loud
Yes,
and
sir,
clear.
we can hear you, sir.
Can you see
Very
my
clear.
audio as well?
We can see
Yes,
you,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Of
We
we
can
course,
can
see
see
yes,
your
sir.
we
We
can
can
see your
see your
handsome
details.
face.
Very, very good.
We can see your
Fine.
very handsome face.
Okay, thank you. This is human rights violation. Okay, right. So we're trying to look at what human rights is. Let's look at what security is. You will hardly approach any exam that will not require you to define human rights and security. In fact, you're going to have exam questions on human rights, you're going to have exam questions on security, you're going to have exam questions on the connection between these two variables. So, understanding these two variables is very, very important. Okay, so what is security or what is national security? Okay, now there are also two perspectives to understanding what constitutes national security or what constitutes security. Again, the concept of security does not have a single universally acceptable definition. It means different things to different people, right? It's a nebulous concept, it is plethora in nature, it is omnibus, it's an umbrella concept. However, there are two ways of looking at it. Not just two ways, there are two schools of thought. Okay, there are two schools of thought as far as understanding national security or security is all about. The first school of thought is what we call the traditional school of thought. Okay, if you don't want to call it the traditional school of thought, you can say the traditional perspective, right? The second school of thought is what we call the modern school of thought or the modern perspective. And I guarantee you there's definitely an exam question on these two schools of thought. So, what's a traditional school of thought all about? For the traditional school of thought, security is defined in the context of the ability or the capacity of a state to guarantee her territorial integrity and also protect lives and properties of her citizens. Very simple. And I'm sure there are so many of us in this class that once we say, what is security? What comes to your mind as well is the ability of a state to protect its territorial integrity and also to guarantee safety of its citizens. Is that definition correct? Yes, it is correct. Is that what security is all about? No, that is not what security is all about. There is more to that than meets the eyes, right? So more often than not, people say security is the absence of fear, or security is the absence of threat. And sometimes I ask the question, is it really possible for threats to be completely absent? Is it really possible? Your guess is as good as mine, right? So, but for the traditional school of thought, security is more in terms of capacity. Security is more in terms of power, in terms of ability of a state, to guarantee safety of our citizens and to guarantee the protection of its citizens. So for them, security is militaristic and state-centric, meaning that for you to be secured, you must invest in military might and capacity. For a country to be secured, for the citizens of a country to be secured, for the territorial integrity of a country to be protected, that country must invest heavily in its military, because for them, security is militaristic and state-centric. State-centric means it is state-centered. It means that emphasis is on the state, because for them, the state is the primary actor with the primary responsibility to provide security. So they don't think that non-state actors can provide security. They see the state as having the exclusive preserve as far as the provision of security is concerned. That is why, world over, you see that the budget for defense and security is usually humongous. In Nigeria, since 2009 that we started grappling with the challenge of Boko Haram, you can see that the budget for defense and security has always been the highest in Nigeria since 2009. No sector, including education, including health, in fact, no sector of Nigeria takes as much money as the defense and security sector takes, because the state feels that it is when they pump in more money for the security organizations that we can be secure. Again, this aligns with the traditional school of thought as far as understanding security is concerned. So more often than not, we let students understand that the traditional school of thought aligns with the realist explanation of the state. Remember your 807, the theory of realism by Hans J. Morgenthau? So the traditional school of thought, as far as security is concerned, aligns with that of the realists. Okay? It aligns with that of the realist school of thought. It aligns with that of the realist school of thought. Sorry, my phone is overheating. I don't know. I'm surprised. Okay? It aligns with the realist school of thought that emphasizes on power. Remember that realism as a theory of international relations is also known as power theory. So where is the power lying? The power lies in the state, or lies with the state. Okay, so the traditional perspective is militaristic, it is state-centric in nature, and it emphasizes the role of power and capacity as ways through which a state can protect her territorial integrity and also protect the lives and properties of her citizens. For them, once a state can do that, it means that such a state is secured. Is that correct? The answer is yes, and it is no. A state may have all the military capacity in the world, yet insecure. Let's take a look at the second school of thought. That's the modern school of thought. The modern school of thought is not really an antithesis of the traditional school of thought, though it looks like an antithesis. Now, I said it's not really an antithesis because it's not like the modern school of thought is saying that the traditional school of thought is completely useless. No, that's not what it's saying. It's only saying that there's a better way, an additional way or dimension of understanding security beyond state and capacity, beyond military might, there are more important modernized way of understanding security that state also needs to begin to take a look at. So unlike the traditional school of thought, the modern perspective is human-centered and development-centered. Remember, the traditional perspective was state-centric and militaristic. The modern perspective is human-centered and development-centered. In other words, it is human-centric, human-centered. So it is human-centric. It emphasizes security in the context of human welfare and well-being. Now, the modern school of thought does not look at security in terms of the weapons, the arms and ammunition the country is able to get. The nuclear weapons, the ballistic, the intercontinental missiles, or anti-ballistics air defense system, that's not what they are looking at. They are looking at security in the context of the human well-being and welfare vis-a-vis development. So the modern school of thought feels that, yes, security is about state capacity, but there's more to that. Security is also about human well-being and human welfare. Security is also about development. And the argument is that when you have development, you will have less cases of insecurity. And that when you have underdevelopment, you have more cases of insecurity. And I tell you, take a look at Nigeria, and maybe for those of you who live in Abuja, take a look at Abuja, and you see that areas in Abuja that are developed, you don't have issues of insecurity there. Areas that are underdeveloped, like Nyanya Maraba, like Masaka, like Gwagwa Karimu, like Pape, the insecurity there is second to none. What about on a global scale? Countries that are developed, you don't hear things like banditry, like terrorism, like militancy. You don't hear all of those things. Because there's a high level of development. There's high level of focus on human well-being and human welfare. The state makes provision for the basic needs and necessities of their citizens. And by implication, the state is enjoying stability. It was McNamara, the former United States Secretary of Defense, who once said that security means development and underdevelopment means insecurity. What that means is that if a country is underdeveloped, it becomes insecure. If a country is developed, it becomes secured. Because, of course, what reasons will citizens even have to begin to carry arms against the state? Because the state makes provision. So the issue of marginalization, the issue of exclusion, the issue of poverty, all of that does not even arise because people are not poor. So the modern school of thought does not ridicule the traditional, but is saying that there is more to security than just capacity of the state, than just the military might of the state. That we must look at security in the context of the human person and the well-being of the human person in relation also to development of a state. It is because of this modern perspective or modern explanation of security that you now have things like human security. I am sure lately everybody hears the word human security. Before now, nobody talks human security. What we talk about is national security. Now we talk about human security. We talk about food security. In fact, the Ministry of Agriculture in Nigeria is now the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Keying into the modern explanation of security. Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. So all these terminologies are born out of the modern explanation of the concept of security beyond the state-centric, perspective. The modern school of thought is associated with the well-being of man in relation to development. And I said this explanation is what brought about the concept of human security. Human security has different components. One component of human security is food security. Another component is environmental security. Another component is political security, right? Food security, environmental security, political security, health security, economic security. All these are fundamental components of human security, which is a product of the modern thinking or the modern rethinking of the concept of. So we must abreast ourselves with this component. Human security has different components. One component is food security, another component security, another component is economic security, another component is health security. Today you hear things like energy security. Now we begin to link climate change and security. Today we can securitize a lot of things that hitherto were not seen as security threats. Now you can securitize food, you can securitize agriculture, you can securitize environment, you can securitize climate, you can securitize energy, you can even securitize marriage. As a result of domestic violence in their home, it means that even marriage can be securitized. Marriage can become a threat. Okay, so the modern understanding of security has given us an opportunity to be able to securitize. When I say securitize, I mean looking at things as security, which before now were not seen as security or as security matters or as security issues. Again, let's go back to the component. Food security. Do you know that when food is not available, people become food insecure? When food is available and people cannot afford it, people also are food insecure. When food is available and people can afford it, but the quality of the food is poor, people become food insecure. The traditional school of thought will not look at it from this angle, that more often than not, what we eat constitutes a security threat to us. What we eat is a threat to our life. And it means that if the state wants to protect our lives, the state must also ensure that what we eat is not a threat to our life. Very unique explanation. If you are a general in the Nigerian army and you eat something that is poisonous, poison does not recognize the ranks that you carry on your shoulders. You will die. Guess what? We lost our former chief of army staff, right? General Tawhid Lagbaja, to sickness. He's one of the most secured Nigerian, because if you see his convoy alone, but yet he died not by the bullet, but by sickness. It means that even he was health insecure. Which is also a component of human security. So food security is one. I see our wives and sisters sometimes frying all manner of things in the kitchen, creating confusion here and there, but yet the quality of what they are frying is not good for the health of the family. You go and buy geisha, you go and buy tin tomato that you are not even sure whether there's tomatoes inside. You go and buy sardine, you go and buy, there's this corn my wife used to buy, I banned her from buying that corn. It's like she want to do fried rice. That corn, you know that corn. I know you know, especially the women in the class, they know that corn. It looks like a fermented corn. They put it and they open a container. All those things contain preservative chemicals. They are threats to your security. So we need to begin to look at security from that angle. In fact, your kitchen is a threat to your security. What comes out from your kitchen? Right? So food security has to do with availability of food, affordability of food, and the quality of food. If any of those three is missing, it means the people are food insecure. The next component is health security. It has to do with people's well-being. When all of those things, people cannot afford medicals, people cannot afford drugs, or the drugs are also of poor quality, or the drugs are fake, it also means that people are health insecure. Environmental security. I pity those my friends who are in the Niger Delta. I was in Port Harcourt for a training was it last year? And I saw that even the colors of the rain in some part of Port Harcourt is different because of continuous carbon emission into the atmosphere. Some people live in areas where industrial activities take place, the air is polluted, the water is polluted. That is a threat to your security. We call that environmental security. Do you know that change in climatic conditions can also be a trigger for conflict? Today, you can't talk about the farmers' herders conflict without associating it with environmental changes, right? So change in climatic condition, change in rainfall, all of this also can be a serious threat to national security. In fact, the Lake Chad Basin is drying up. And because it's drying up, the level of water has reduced drastically, leading to also migration, affecting economic and agricultural activities in that axis. We now have what we call resource conflict. All of these are associated with the environment. What about economic security? When people are poor, when people cannot afford basic necessities of life, they are economically insecure. And that can become a threat. That can become a threat. It means that any state that wants to guarantee security must look at security just beyond, must look at security just beyond military, police, and all of these traditional security institutions. Must look at security from a more unique dimension, right? That is why today you see the military saying that they are employing both kinetic and non-kinetic approach in trying to address insecurity, right? So kinetic approach is a military approach, non-kinetic approach is also the non-military approach. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my phone is giving me a lot of warning. My phone is overheating. I will need to end up this class to avoid another human security threat. But let's take just two from the class. Anybody, anything? Who has a question? Just two persons.
I have a question, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for tonight's section. My question is on the definition of human rights. While you were defining the definition of human rights, you mentioned that is a right that human beings have by virtue of being a member of a state, and that prompts my own question. We have some individuals in the world that are stateless. They are stateless. They don't have a state. Legally, we don't recognize them as member of a state. So now, the question is, we have a definition that says that human right is the right and freedom of human being by virtue of being human being, by virtue of living in the society. Not by virtue of living in the society, by virtue of being human being. So far as you are a human being, you are automatically having that human right, which is a natural right. So if by virtue of being human being, you have automatic right, then if you have to look at your own definition you gave us that say by virtue of being a member of a state, it's a bit antagonizing itself. So I want you to just clarify that part. So do we need to be a member of a state before we have human rights, or we just need to be human to have human rights?
Okay, good question. I am not so sure whether you were in the class when we started, and I said the concept of human rights means different things to different people, and that there is no single universally acceptable definition for human rights. Okay, there are multiplicities of definitions as to what constitutes human rights. Right. Now you enjoy human rights because you are a human being, right? However, there are certain locations you find yourself where you cannot enjoy every right because you are not a legal member of that state. Okay? I'm a Nigerian. If I travel outside of Nigeria and I'm not a citizen of the country I've traveled to, there are things I cannot enjoy. Even in countries like Canada, where you have immigrants that are now permanent residents, there are things permanent residents cannot enjoy that citizens of those countries enjoy. It doesn't mean that they are not human beings. It doesn't mean that they don't enjoy human rights. They enjoy human rights, but there are other rights they cannot enjoy because they are not citizens of that country. And I gave us an example of Nigeria that if you are not a Nigerian, you cannot be part of the Nigerian armed forces. You cannot vote and be voted for. These are human rights, but you can't enjoy them in Nigeria if you are not a Nigerian. Aziz, I don't know if that is clear.
It's clear.
Okay, very well. Sunday Joseph.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the class this evening. Mine is not a question, but an observation. I noticed that the course title is Human Rights, Democracy, and International Politics, which the course outline is somehow different from what you are explaining, because there's a same course title that is Human Rights and Security, which is MIAD 804. But this course is MIAD 816, which is Human Rights, Democracy, and International Politics.
Okay, good question. Thank you, Sunday. Again, I still suspect that Sunday did not join the class when we started the class. I told the class that this course is human rights and security. There's a mix-up on the LMS, and it is now showing human right, democracy, and something. That's not the title of the course. The title of the course is human right and security. I've taught this course for years now. Okay, so we are on track. Hopefully, like I said, that in the coming weeks, the LMS, the adjustment to be done on the LMS, the coordinator is aware of that mix-up. I taught this course just last semester as well.
Okay,
Sunday.
thank you.
Okay, very well then. Let's just take one more person. Do we have any other person? Who is here? Uju, last person. Kuti Uju, your hand is up. Is Kuti Uju there? She's not there. Whether it's a he or a she, I don't know. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I saw somebody who was trying to show us how to use the comments on the YouTube, how we can use the YouTube and everybody be able to speak. If you are that person, kindly private chat me. Let's discuss further. On this note, I want to bring the class to an end. I want to appreciate all of you for being in class. We will meet next week, Friday, by the special grace of God. Okay, so from me, it is bye, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. And bye, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Stay happy, everybody.
So I am ending the meeting now. So bye, everybody.
Thank you, sir.